محمد وآل محمد وأجل. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرفهم أجمعين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. الله صل على محمد واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم: إن لقتل الحسين حرارة في قلوب المؤمنين لن تبرد أبدا. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأجل فرجهم. Dear Mu'mineen and Mu'minat, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This majlis tonight and other such majalis all over the world, and here I refer to majalis which are being held, commemorations of Ashura and Karbala that have been organized after the passage of the 10 days, the first 10 days, the first Ashra. This majlis and all other such majalis, I believe, hold a special place and are especially important. And why is that? These majalis, they lack the crowds that the first 10 days witnessed. They do not have that grandeur that the majalis of the first 10 days had. But that is perhaps exactly why these majalis today and from now on till the end of the 2-month mourning period that is to follow, these majalis perhaps represent the continuation of the Hussaini movement with greater intensity and determination. More than the majalis of the first 10 days, it is tonight's majlis and other majalis that will follow that represent the Zainabi determination to ensure that what happened in Karbala does not stay in Karbala. What happened on the 10th of Muharram in the year 61 Hijri will continue to be remembered and recounted till the day of judgment and perhaps beyond. These majalis, well, all majalis represent this determination, this Zainabi determination. But these majalis represent it even more, because they are happening after the 10-day intense period of mourning, when apart from our passion and our grief and sorrow, there are a lot of social dynamics at play that push us down this path as well. And they are very good. They should be there. It now requires greater determination to keep al-aza and mourning going, inshallah. When I say Zainabi determination, it is a term that I haven't just used loosely or without putting any thought into it. As our scholars have taught us, this commemoration and remembrance is associated most intensely with Lady Zainab. And she has played a pivotal role in ensuring that it stays alive. And tonight we're going to spend a few minutes going over her role a little bit and understanding it better, inshallah. Please support me with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farj. When the captives of Karbala were brought into Yazid's court, it was a very painful and strange scene. Just imagine it, dear Mu'mineen and Mu'minat. The court has been decorated. Expensive curtains and brocades and jewels. Yazid, La'natullah alayh, is sitting on his throne, gazing down upon the court. Seated lower than him are tens, maybe hundreds of noblemen, heads of tribes and clans and governors and the like. Because this event had been announced days in advance and they had been called to the court. There are tens of ambassadors from other surrounding kingdoms and polities, and innumerable servants and soldiers and attendants, all of them dressed up, because this was going to be an important celebration. And into this court are then, when everyone's ready, in a choreographed manner, the noble captives of Karbala are brought in. And they are tired. Many of them are barefoot. Their clothes are covered in dust. Maybe they are in places tattered and torn, perhaps. Their hands have been tied to their necks. That's what the Maqtal says. In the manner of prisoners of war. It is said that our fourth Imam is the first person to be led into the court in this manner. And then the ladies and the children. Yazid imagines that his power is being projected and displayed at its apex at this point in time. He has prepared for days for this particular event. He has prepared for days. And when the captives have been brought forward and everyone has seen them, he then orders for a golden tray to be brought forward. And on that golden tray, which is placed before him, is a something covered by a cloth. And he orders for the cloth to be lifted. He orders for the cloth to be lifted. On seeing the holy head of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu was salam, Lady Zainab cries out in that court, "O my beloved brother, O Rasulullah's beloved, O Rasulullah's daughter's beloved." This is how she calls out at the top of her voice, crying aloud. And the tables begin to turn. The Maqatil say that she cried out in this manner and the court burst into tears. The court began to cry. These are, Lady Zainab isn't simply reacting in an emotional manner. This taking of the name of Rasulullah, of Rasulullah's daughter. Everyone there claims to be Muslim, right? Or most of them at least, barring some ambassadors, etc. And the intensity of her grief expressed through those cries, the court bursts into tears. Yazid is shaken. Yazid is shaken. This was supposed to be his moment when he would demonstrate his ultimate power, his ability to crush what he calls rebels, no matter which family they may belong to. It's a projection of his power. And now you have the court crying for these captives. He's crying. This is Bibi Zainab's effect and influence, her ability to turn the tables, to shape events. We can see that on display here. We can see that on display here. And this isn't surprising, dear brothers and sisters, because this isn't the first time that Lady Zainab has demonstrated this ability. This isn't the first time. Just a few days prior to this incident, when these noble captives were brought into Kufa, this is the first city or settlement that they were brought into after Karbala. When they were brought in there, we see Lady Zainab demonstrating her enormous abilities and power to shape events there as well. In Yazid's court, she speaks and cries out aloud and has this enormous impact on those present. In Kufa, we will see her impact even without speaking. There is a book which has gathered eloquent sermons, poetry, which has been written, given by ladies in the early centuries of Islam. It has been compiled by a scholar, a reliable scholar associated with the Sunni sect of Islam. His name is Ibn Tayfur. The book is famous. It's called Balaghatun Nisa. Balaghat, the eloquences of ladies. So he's gathered these, whatever he could find, eloquent speeches, poetry, letters written by ladies in the first couple of years, the first couple of centuries of the history of Islam. This is how this has been recorded in this book. The captives have been brought into Kufa and into the marketplace of Kufa. The marketplace. It's a noisy place. People are buying and selling and screaming, and there are a lot of animals. So it's a noisy place. And it becomes even noisier. Why? Because the Kufans gather around the captives of Karbala and they began to beat their heads and cry. You all know this peculiar feature of Kufan identity, this sense of betrayal, this crying over the crimes of Karbala, even though they were themselves a part of these crimes, this inviting of Imam Hussein and then betraying Hazrat Muslim. You know their strange character, and which is why even today among the Muslims and in Muslim culture, they are the epitome of betrayal and treachery. So they are now crying, gathered around the captives. And in Balaghatun Nisa, it has been written that after a while, Bibi Zainab, Hazrat Zainab Salamullah Alaiha, gestured. وَأَوْمَأَتْ إِلَى النَّاسِ. She gestured towards the people present there. She hasn't said a word. She gestured. Perhaps she raised her hand in this way. She gestured. أَوْمَأَتْ إِلَى النَّاسِ أَنُسْكُتُوا. Gestured to them to keep quiet. And the book says, وَارْتَدَّتِ الْأَنْفَاسِ. The breath of everyone who was present there was drawn in sharply, simply by seeing her gesture. وَسَكَتَتِ الْأَجْرَاسِ. And even the bells that were hanging on the necks of the animals and making that clanging sound, they seemed to cease movement. See the enormous force of her personality. She hasn't even uttered a word yet. أَوْمَأَتْ إِلَى النَّاسَ نُسْكُتُوا. Simply gestured to them to keep quiet. Dear brothers and sisters, this lady and ladies such as these These are our role models. Role models for all of us, men and women, especially women, but not only women. They are role models for all of us. This is what a woman, what a woman who has been raised in the garden of Islam, in the maktab of Ahlul Bayt, is able to do and achieve. The strength and power that our women, when rooted in the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, connected to the holy personalities of the Ahlul Bayt, are able to achieve. This was a time when in the Arab world, till just a few decades prior to this event, before Islam began and before Islam became powerful, women were officially seen as worthless. They were actually bought and so, apart from the slave girls, husbands had the right to sell their wives. We are talking about a culture that was so debased. Wives had no right to their property, to any decisions. The only worth of a woman was associated with how attractive she looks, how well she can cater to the male gaze. That's all. Anything else about a woman did not matter. Anything else about a woman did not matter. This was just a few decades prior. And look at Islam, how it manages to develop such a strong woman. Dear brothers and sisters, there's a lesson in this for us even today. Even today. That earlier aspect of women's worth being determined mainly by their, or solely by their physical beauty, persists even today to a large degree in non-Muslim cultures and ways of looking at women. Of course, to that has been added a few other things, and women are now made to feel ashamed of their femininity, the feminine roles that they can play as mother and other domestic roles. They've been made to feel ashamed of that. While Islam elevates a woman and allows her to feel fulfilled and proud, playing every important role, including her feminine roles as well. Anyway, coming back. So we see Lady Zainab's enormous power to influence things by speaking and crying in Yazid's court and by simply gesturing in Kufa. When she does this and turns the tables on Yazid, ruins his plan in his court, Yazid begins to panic. This wasn't how it was supposed to turn out, right? He begins to panic. And he wishes to reassert his authority on that gathering and bring it back on track. So what does he do now? He picks up a stick that he had. And you've all heard what he does. It's so difficult to recount it. He picks up a stick. There is Imam Hussein's head on a golden platter and tray in front of him. And he then begins to strike on those holy lips. As he's doing this, Hazrat Zainab begins to cry louder, begins to cry even louder, once again taking back control of that gathering from Yazid. And you want to know what happens? The Maqatil record that at this point, an old man from among Yazid's own noblemen stands up in court. Upon hearing Lady Zainab's cries, he stands up. And he says, "Oh Yazid, you are striking upon these lips. I have seen with my very own eyes the holy messenger kissing these lips, kissing Hussein's lips when he was a child, and saying out aloud, Inna al-Hasana wal-Hussein Sayyada Shababi Ahlil Jannah. Hassan and Hussein are the leaders of the youth of paradise. And you are striking these lips. Once again, the court is thrown into disarray. One of his own noblemen, his name was Abu Barza al-Aslami. Abu Barza al-Aslami, his name, because of this one act of love and bravery, he managed to not only redeem himself from his association with the oppressive ruler of that time, but is now remembered with love in gatherings such as this, year after year, all over the world. MashaAllah. Abu Barza al-Aslami objects, and Yazid orders him to be thrown out of the court. He is thrown out of the court. However, he was thrown out of the court, but it seems that his life took a turn for the better. Because after this, we don't have much detail about his life, but it seems that he continued to serve Islam till he was martyred a few years later in one of the wars that he was fighting for the defense of Islam. So it seems that he was able to hold his purity and purity of position right up until his death. And perhaps that's why Allah has rewarded him with this, that people like you and I will remember him and send blessings and salawat on him till the day of judgment. Please recite a salawat for him and for all the lovers of the Ahl Bayt. Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah. So Yazid goes back to then doing what he was with that stick. And while he was doing this, the Maqatil record that he was reciting poetry. He was reciting poetry. You've heard this before. La'ibat Hashimu bil mulk fala. He's declaring his status as a disbeliever, as an infidel. He says, Bani Hashim, all this talk about revelation and Quran and Nubuwat and La'ibat Hashimu bil mulk fala khabarun ja'a wala wahyun nazal. Let me tell you something. This is what is, if I were to translate his poetry into a free form, he was saying, this was all a game played by Bani Hashim. There was simply no revelation, no Quran, no Jibreel, no nothing, no prophethood. This was a game played by them so that they could rule over the Arabs. La'ibat Hashimu bil mulk. He is declaring his disbelief openly. And then he goes on to say something very unusual. He says, Laita ashyaqi bi badra shahidu. Oh, how I wish my ancestors in the battle of Badr. I'll come to that in a minute. Oh, how I wish they could see this scene today. My ancestors who were killed in Badr. My ancestors who were defeated in Badr. I wish they could see this scene today. How the descendants of the victors of Badr are being tormented today. It's strange that he recalls Badr. It's strange. Why is it strange? Well, there were so many other battles. There was Uhud, there was Ahzab, there was Hunain, there was Khaybar, and there were many other smaller battles. Why Badr? In fact, the number of Meccans who were killed, for example, in Uhud was greater than the number of Meccans killed in Badr. The scale of the battle in Uhud was much bigger. Badr was a small battle. The numbers involved were small. Badr was the first battle between the newly established Muslim society in Medina and the unbelievers of Mecca. And it was won by the Muslims with some loss of life. It was won by them. But why Badr? The thing that comes to mind regarding Badr and why Badr was remembered by Yazid and why he talks about those who were defeated in Badr being avenged today in court and not those who were killed or defeated in Uhud. Is that because Badr is a turning point? Badr is a turning point. Badr is the point at which Islam, Imamat, the system of guidance begins to fight back. It begins to fight back. Before Badr, it is the Muslims who are being subjected to one-way violence in Makkah and around Medina. And they are not permitted to fight back. The strategy that the leader, the Imam, that is our holy messenger, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad alim. The Imam has decided that we must bear losses and avoid fighting back. The minimum self-defense, yes, but no counterattack. And this is how this goes on for more than 10 years. Then they moved to Medina. And even while they were living in Medina, their possessions were being looted in Makkah. If they would travel outside of Medina, they would be pounced upon and they would be attacked. In Badr, they decide to fight back. It's the first time they fight back. Dear brothers and sisters, there's an important lesson in this. The enemies of the system of guidance, the system of Imamat, they dislike the followers of Imamat at all times. And they work against them at all times. But as long as the followers of Imamat are simply being nice people and suffering and bearing the injustices that they are subjected to, they continue to dislike them. They seem to be fine with this. But when the followers of Imamat acquire enough strength and organization under the system of Imamat to fight back, that's what sets the enemies of Imamat, sets them on fire. It's unbearable for them. And this is something that we can see even today. If you look around the world, perhaps you will be able to see the enemies of Islam dislike all Muslims. They dislike all Muslims, everything that Muslims do. But where is their hatred directed with the greatest of intensity? Where is it directed? It is exactly those societies that have organized themselves under the system of Imamat to be able to fight back. So anyway, coming back to what we see in Damascus. Layta ashyakhi bibadra shahidu. I wish my ancestors in Badr could see the descendants of the victors of Badr being tormented. He says this. And this is when Lady Zainab, after her crying dies down, and the situation is very strange now in that court. Honestly, it's difficult to say who in this court is really the victor and who is the prisoner. Things flip around so much in those few minutes in this court that Our Lady begins her famous khutbah. A khutbah which is a long khutbah. And if we were to speak about it, of course, it would require many lectures and majalis to do justice to even a part of it. But here I will simply pick one single line from this khutbah, which comes halfway down into the khutbah. where she addresses Yazid while he's seated on his throne, addresses him directly. Addresses him directly. Remember, she's been brought in as a prisoner, tied as a prisoner. And this is what she says in this part. She says, looking him in the eye, addressing him straight, Kid kaidak, was'a sa'yak, wa nasib juhdak. What she says is, make whatever plan or strategy you may wish. Try as hard as you may desire. Do your worst. Challenging him openly in his court while he's seated on the throne, surrounded by his courtiers. Do whatever you think you can. Wallahi, la tamhu dhikrana. I swear by Allah the Almighty, you will not be able to erase our memory. You will not be able to erase our remembrance. Allahumma salli Muhammad wa ali. This is not some empty threat. This is simply a statement of fact. Our presence here today and thousands of other such gatherings 1400 years after this event are ample proof that it was simply a statement of fact, not some threat. It's a statement of fact. La tamhu dhikrana. Labbaik ya Zainab. Thank you. Which is why I began tonight's talk with this hadith. Inna liqatl al-Husayn hararatan fi qulub al-mu'minin lan tabrada abada. Verily, on account of Husayn's qatl and murder, there is a warmth, a fire in the hearts of mu'mineen that will never die down. Lan tabrada abada, abada. And which is why you have this global movement continuing 1400 years after it has started. The system of Imamat, the Imamat movement, powered by the engine of Karbala. Powered by the engine of Karbala. You cannot have this movement survive and progress if you take Karbala and Hussein out of it. Just cannot. It's meant to work with Karbala at its heart. The Karbala paradigm, the lessons from Karbala, the role models of Karbala, the men, the women, the children, the slaves of Karbala. They are meant to power us and guide us forward. Dear brothers and sisters, one of the holy personalities present in Karbala was, of course, our fourth Imam, Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salatu wassalam. Please recite us. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal faraj. Of course, his role on the day of Ashura is a special one. As part of Allah's plan to continue with the system of guidance of Imamat, it was decided that he would fall ill for a brief period. And in this way was able to survive and continue the system. But he was there. He was there in Karbala. He saw what happened. He was there in Kufa. He was there in Sham, in Yazid's court, which we've been going over last few minutes. It has been narrated that some years later, when he was in Medina, and he would always narrate and recount the sufferings in Karbala, before Karbala, after Karbala. Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam's Imamat stretched on for 35 long years, approximately. It's one of the longest periods of imamat that we have. 35 years is a very long time. In comparison, Imam Hussein's imamat was about 10 years of duration. For 35 years, one of the most important roles that he played was to recount and remember what happened in Karbala in as much detail as he could, at every opportunity that he could. And therefore, it has been narrated, and it is not surprising, that such a person would one day be asked, "O my master, O my Imam, among all these sorrows and tribulations and trials that you and your family were subjected to, and which you narrate and recount so frequently, which one was the most painful? Where was it most difficult for you?" And you've all heard his reply, because he said 3 times, "Asham, Asham, Asham." And it is strange. It is in Karbala that they were kept thirsty. It is in Karbala that the Ashab and the Ahlul Bayt, the Bani Hashim were martyred. It is in Karbala that a small infant was slaughtered while he was seeking water. It is in Karbala that the tents were ransacked, that the ladies ran in terror, that the children were trampled over by horses. The bodies of the martyred were trampled. When they come to Kufa, it is difficult. It is their first encounter with the mob, with the crowd, with the court. And that too in Kufa. This family was part of the ruling elite in Kufa 20 years back. Imam Ali alayhi salam, his capital was in Kufa. Lady Zainab was the most respected lady in this very Kufa, and now she is being dragged through the marketplace. But Imam Sajjad says, "Asham, Asham, Asham." Until today, we are struggling to understand why he said this. Why he said this. We can only guess by going over the tribulations and indignities that they were subjected to in Damascus, and guess, perhaps this is the reason, perhaps this zulm is the reason, perhaps that zulm is the reason. We can only guess. For example, we can look at the fact that they were made to halt outside the gates of Damascus for 3 days while the city was prepared. In those days, cities were not like today's cities. Cities were fortified. They were surrounded by walls. And these walls had a number of gates. So when they came to one of the gates from where they could enter the city, they were asked to wait outside the gate. Outside the gate is an area which is barren. Nobody stays there. There is no shade. There are no houses. There are no markets. They were made to wait there for 3 days. Why? Because the city and the court aren't yet prepared for the celebrations. There are curtains to be put up. There are banners and flags to be put up. Walls have to be washed. Streets have to be cleaned. There is a big celebration that has to happen. Is this why he said it? Perhaps. Is this why he said Asham, Asham, Asham? Perhaps. This is a cruel indignity that they were subjected to. When they finally entered, they see a city which is bedecked, beautifully decorated. It has been narrated in our books that one of the eyewitnesses of what happened says, "I wanted to go to for ziyarat, a journey to Bayt al-Maqdas, the holy city of Jerusalem, the first Qibla of the Muslimin. I wanted to go there. He was somebody who stayed some distance away from Damascus. So his path obviously went through Damascus. So he said, I first journeyed to Damascus, and from Damascus it is then a short journey onward to Al-Quds, Baytul Maqdis. And it was for the longest time, till about 60 years ago, and you can check with those who are from those times who are still alive. It was normal for anyone who goes to Karbala for the ziyarat of Al-Hussein, for him to take a couple of days detour and visit Al-Quds. This was before facts on the ground changed. For centuries, this was normal for Muslims. This was part of the regular, normal pilgrimage circuit for us Muslims, particularly as Shia, till about 60 years ago. And inshallah, that day isn't far when circumstances will change again, and once again it will be part of our regular ziyarat circuit, inshallah. I wanted to go to Baytul Maqdas, he says. So I passed through Damascus. When I entered Damascus, I saw that everyone was busy cleaning and decorating their house. And I couldn't figure out why. So I asked the residents of Damascus, "O people of Damascus, do you all have some special Eid different from what we, the other Muslimin, have? Because we don't know of any Eid at this time of the year. This is this kind of decoration." So they said, "Haven't you heard?" So, haven't I heard what? "Haven't you heard that Amirul Mu'mineen Yazid has been granted victory over a dangerous band of rebels? And we are here to celebrate his victory. They are going to be brought into this city tied in chains, and we are getting ready to celebrate it." So he says, fine, let's see. He says, "I was near one of these gates when I saw these rebels, this dangerous band of rebels, being finally led into the city. Being finally led into the city. What did I see? I saw soldiers holding flags and spears, atop each of which was a head. And I saw ladies and small children seated on camels without any saddles. Without any saddles. Apart from being very uncomfortable and painful to sit without a saddle, this used to be a sign of indignity, slaves and captives, so that they could be subjected to indignity as well, were made to sit without a saddle. And I saw them come in. The moment they came in, the whole city erupted in singing songs and making that special sound, that hilhile sound that Arab societies, the ladies make even today when they celebrate. And part of their celebration, it seems, was to throw down burning rags of cloth and clumps of grass that had been set on fire onto these rebels. Is this why Imam Sajjad said, Asham, Asham, Asham? Perhaps. This convoy moved ahead, came closer to where I was standing. I was curious, who are these people? So in that screaming and jostling and pushing, I managed to bring myself near one of the camels. I spoke to the lady. I called out to the lady who was seated on the camel, and I asked her, "Who are you? Who are you all?" And her reply struck him like a bolt of lightning. "We are the Ahl Bayt. We are the family of the Holy Messenger. We are the family of Hussein ibn Ali. He says, I didn't know what to do. While standing there, I somehow managed to tell this lady that I am one of the Sahabi. I have seen the Holy Messenger with my own eyes. Is there something that I can do for you? Is there something that I can do for you? Please tell me. She said, yes, there is something that you can do. You see that? You see that head right in front of me? I looked at it. Yes, I can see it. It resembled the Holy Messenger. I have seen the Messenger. It resembled him. You see that head? Please go to the soldier carrying that head and convince him somehow, anyhow, to walk many steps ahead with that head, away from us. He thought to himself, this lady cannot bear to see the head of Imam Hussein up on the stake, so close to her. And then I wondered, she's been with this head for days and weeks now in the journey. Why is this she suddenly struck by terror and fear at this time? So I asked her. She says, oh Sahabi, it isn't because I cannot bear to look upon it. We are the ladies of the household of the Prophet. We aren't dressed appropriately. Our faces are visible in this bazaar. I cannot bear for these na-mahram men to look upon us. If this head goes further ahead, it is so radiant that everybody will end up staring at it and nobody will look upon us. Is this why he said, Asham, 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 perhaps? And then after the tribulations of Sham are something else. After the court, the event at the court and Lady Zainab's khutbah and Imam Sajjad's khutbah and all those events had transpired, these captives were finally placed in a ruined house. In a broken down, run down, roofless, they say, house. This was to be their prison. That's where they stayed. They were given some meager food for some time. That's where they prayed. That's where they remembered their martyrs. And that's where one of the nights, a little girl suddenly woke up from her sleep and began to cry for her father. Her aunts told her, oh my child, your father has gone on a journey. Go back to sleep. He will come back in some time. But she refuses to calm down. I want my father. I want my father. I want my father. This goes on so much that all the other ladies wake up. They begin to cry as well. Wah Husaina, Wah Husaina. The commotion reaches the ears of the tyrant. He asks, what is the commotion about? They say, this has happened. The child crying, the ladies crying with the child. He says, all right, send the head to them. Once again, Hussein ibn Ali's head comes on a platter. Not before Yazid this time, before his little daughter. Maybe she was 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old. The narrations say that she picks up this head, embraces it lovingly. And while she was running her hands over his beard, says, oh my dear father, who is it that has caused your beard to turn red with blood? Who is it, my father, that has taken you away from me? Ala la'natallahi ala al-qawmi al-dhalimeen. سَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ